She woke to the sea's breath at the window and the faint, papery crackle of a wick dying in cold tallow. Dawn had smudged a pale thumbprint across the eastern sky, the color of watered milk, and the stone of the chamber kept the night's chill as if unwilling to surrender a hard-won Talon. Catelyn slid from the bed without calling for her maids. Habit had taught her the quiet work a woman must do to keep her own heart. The floor was old red tile, waves of shallow dips worn by men and women long dead, and the soles of her feet learned its history every morning. She crossed to the window and pushed the shutters wide. Air smelling of salt and damp and fish scales came in, and below, the city stirred with the thin noises of people who had not yet put on their day voices. From here the rooftops fell away in a rippling, uneven quilt, slate and clay and patched boards stitched with lines of chimney smoke. Farther, the Blackwater lay sheeted in pewter. River barges nosed toward their moorings like tired animals. Beyond them, the bay groaned and glittered while gulls swung in idling ellipses, counting scraps before they existed. The Red Keep, girded in its jagged confidence, did not soften with morning. Its towers threw long ribs of shadow into the waking courtyards. A bell rang, lonely and quick. She listened to it and thought it sounded like a spoon tapped once against old metal. On the table beside the window someone, one of the girls last night, had set the tray of bread crusts and preserved quince and a little clay pâté of butter pressed with a rose. The quince tasted like autumn wood remembered across summers. Catelyn broke 2 oblongs from the loaf, coarse with bran that rasped softly in the fingers, and ate them standing. She drank water instead of wine. Then she reached for the wooden token she kept near her bed. A small sliver of pale wood carved with 7 tiny notches on one face and cut in a pattern like a leaf's underside on the other. It had been made by a man she barely remembered, a bent carver at a market in White Harbor who had pushed it into little Rob's palm while she bargained for eels. She did not know why she had begun keeping it. She only knew that sometimes her thumb found it regardless of what her mind wanted. She held it now and thought of trees with faces and winters that spoke plainly. In the polished bronze mirror, her hair had more frost than frankness. It had begun at her temples and wandered where it pleased. There were nights she wove it tightly and slept without moving, but it never kept the mischief out. She took a comb anyway and drew it through her hair with slow strokes, not for the mirror but for the quiet that sometimes grew out of small rituals. She draped a gown of dark blue wool over her shoulders, a northern shade that gave nothing to these southern stones. A simple girdle and no jewels but the practical weight of a ring of office, thick gold, the seal of the Regency, set on her finger. It felt heavier each day, though she knew it was only herself growing more aware of its metal. A soft knock, as if made by the knuckles of a thought rather than a hand. Her maid Maria slipped in sideways and curtsied. She was a girl from Maidenpool whose eyes never stopped measuring the room. "Your Grace," she said, and her voice had learned the title before her mouth had quite accepted it. "Septa Muriel asks whether you will break your fast with his grace." "If you please." Catelyn nodded. "I will be with them shortly." The girl bobbed again, gathering the tray like a secret, then hesitated with her weight on her back foot as though something in her wanted to be left behind. "The steward of kitchens sent word that the ships from Driftmark will not unload today. The quay is crowded with the wine casks." "Have the watch clear a lane," Catelyn said. "Bread before wine." "Yes, Your Grace." Maria slipped out, the door kissing the frame softly. Catelyn looked once more from the window. The city's breath had deepened. She could hear now a hawker with a thick voice calling pears, another answering with onions, somewhere a child laughing, and then a mother's voice with a sleeve in it. The smell of ash from the morning ovens took hold and pinned the thinner fish odors and tugged them lower. On the table lay the folded parchment she had not finished last night. The seal had not been warmed and pressed, and that was intentional. She read the lines again, scanning her own hand for weakness she could root out. To Lord Wyman she had written, plain as bread, "We will speak peace where we may speak it, and we will guard what is owed and not owed. I ask for men that eat and sleep and stand sentry with eyes that see. I do not ask for songs." It was a northern letter dressed in southern ink. She would finish the rest when the day permitted, and no part of her believed the day would permit much. A guard at her chamber door straightened himself without clatter when she passed him. He was one of the gold cloaks who had put away his old captain's habit of swagger, since she had insisted the men of the city watch come to court and speak one by one of their own wages and rations. He had told the truth then. His boy had been hungry and his wife ill with damp, and he held himself differently now, as if truth had found a place to set its heavy bundle. The corridors smelled of wax and damp stone. Torches spit slowly in iron brackets. She moved toward the Queen's solar not because the room had any love for her, but because the light there was kind to a child's face, and because Tommen liked the window above the narrow garden that held a citrus tree with fruit as bright as coins in a story. As she approached the door, she heard the little short syllables of a boy reading and the dry sandpaper hush of a Septa's guiding voice. She paused in the doorway without announcing herself. Tommen sat with his feet carefully flat on a stool, their soles just kissing the wood to show he had learned, and tea. His book was propped on a stand fashioned like a lion's backs. The cat, Ser Pounce, lay on the carpet at his heel, pretending not to be curious but every third breath taking a whisker's worth of air. The morning had scattered gold into Tommen's hair and made the baby fat along his jaw look like something gentler than it was. He was reading haltingly from a battered treatise on the duties of kings that an earnest man had set down 100 years ago for a boy who later did not live long enough to show whether the words had taken root. A king is first a shepherd, Tommen said, pursing his mouth to push the word out whole. He must walk at the front when the hill is steep. He must eat last when the winter is lean. He must hold his tongue when his people are afraid, and speak when his people need. Steady, Septa Miriel said. She was a woman of lint and iron. She had the trick of making a room expect her to be where she was. Need courage given shape by voice, your grace. Tommen's freckled brow wrinkled. He looked up then and saw Catelyn. He did not leap from his stool or fling himself into a mother's arms. He was not hers and she would not make him pretend. But he brightened in the small way a boy brightens at the arrival of someone who will not scold him for being a boy. Your Grace, he said, quite properly, while his hand, as if it had always been meant to, dropped to stroke the cat's ear. Good morning, she said. How fare shepherds this early? Mildly, he said, and then smiled because he had caught himself echoing their maester. I mean I am learning. You are, Catelyn said. She crossed the carpet, and in passing she put one hand gently on the back of the bookstand to steady it. She did not touch the boy. She looked at the lines he had been reading and saw the quill marks someone had laid in the margins long ago. Little pointing hands with sleeves, a face with its mouth open near a passage about speaking too much. The ink was brown-gray with age. The shepherd's staff is heavy, she said. Even in summer. Tommen nodded. I will grow to lift it, he said carefully, if I eat my oats. Bread before tarts? Septa Miriel observed firmly, as if the observation were a prayer. And today your grace will attend the morning petitions for the first hour only. I have spoken with the Lord Commander. There will be 2 men of the King's Guard beside the dais. Tommen's mouth made a small, private line at the word dais. He liked the dais, he did not like being watched while he liked it. Catelyn saw it and said nothing. Make notes, she told him instead. Even if the words you write are only names and how they made you feel. We remember better what the hand has learned to draw. Yes, your grace, he said. Across the solar in the alcove, where light fell thick against the wall and made sturdy shapes of dust, Sansa sat at a low table with her needlework. I have learned to hide my efforts, she answered, and then looked alarmed at herself, as if the truth had tripped and fallen through a gap in her propriety. Forgive me. There is nothing to forgive. Catelyn stitched 2 neat squares and then laid the needle aside because her hands had begun to feel old and she would not let them show it in their work. Today you will stand beside the dais while the petitions are heard, she said quietly. Not on the dais and not in the back. I want them to see you the way the light sees you, neither raised nor hidden. Sansa's breath caught only that much. Shall I address them? Not yet. Look at their faces, not their clothes. If a man's hat is costly and his hands are clean under it, I have found him more interested in being a man with a hat than in the thing he has come to say." Sansa's gaze flicked to her mother's mouth the way a swallow hunts a thought. "Yes," she whispered. "I can do that." "Good. You will have bread and then go with Septa Miriel and Tommen. I must meet the small council men a while first." She stood then, because to linger is a luxury a regent cannot always afford. She pressed Sansa's hand once, the briefest lightning strike of touch, and let it be enough. Tommen had begun to read again, out loud in a voice that wanted very much to be grown. The cat purred with the industriousness of a mill. The corridor to the council chamber took her through the old spine of the keep where the bones of earlier kings and masons cohabited without complaint. She passed a pair of Tyrell men in livery so green it made the eyes remember summer fields. They bowed with wrists graciously bent, and one of them looked at her ring the way a thirsty man watches a stream for fish. At the stairhead, Varys waited in a garment that had come a long way to pretend to be a robe. He swept into a bow without fuss and did not rise until she had cleared the last step, as if he had found a way to serve that contained no trace of himself in it. "Lord de Varys," she said. "Your Grace," he murmured. "The council is gathering of its own accord. It is a day for accords." "It is a day for work," she said. "The ships from Driftmark are delayed by wine." "What a sentence," Varys observed, and smile lines like gentle parentheses appeared. "I will have my little birds whisper in the right ears downriver. Bread before wine." She looked at him for a heartbeat longer than politeness required, not as a threat but as a habit. She had learned that looking too long at some men made them remember the shape of their own shadows. Varys did not mind being seen in the way other men mind being looked at. He had long since eaten whatever fear that was and stitched a new garment of it. He gestured her forward with his soft hand. Grand Maester Pycelle had already found his chair. He sat like a monument to slowness and blinked at the light as if each blink cost him a small coin and he planned to be paid. Mace Tyrell's bulk swelled like harvest, purple brocade straining near each seam, and he seemed upon first glance to be wholly made of pomp. Upon any second glance, and upon most thirds, the impression held. Oraine Waters, silver-haired and calm, stood near the window speaking low to Paxter Redwine's man. Loras Tyrell, bright as a new-minted promise, was not present. Catelyn had asked that the Kingsguard be in their White Tower unless called. The chair at the table's foot sat empty. Littlefinger, back from his brief excursion to the eastern coast, would come when coming had been made most useful. "Your Grace," Mace Tyrell boomed, rising so abruptly that his chair farted against stone. "We are yours to command. The city is grateful for your hand upon the tiller. I would say so in 100 words if I thought they could carry enough of my gratitude." "Do not injure yourself on your gratitude, Lord Tyrell," Catelyn said mildly, taking the seat at the head of the long table. The carved arms had old finger grooves and new scars. The map upon the table's leather top, 7 kingdoms sketched in lines that were both arrogant and wistful, had been pricked and patched so often it seemed the land itself had leaked and been mended. "We will start with the harbor." Pycelle gathered a breath that sounded rehearsed. "Your Grace, the Redwine fleet, Prosperity sing of it, has reported certain impediments. These impediments take the form of dockmen with hands outstretched and casks too wide for their wagons. It is the opinion of some of us that wine, provided in the proper way, with the appropriate attention to longevity. Bread first, Catelyn said. Flour ground, ovens fed, loaves counted. Wardens of the Bakers' Guild will meet with me at noon. Lord Mace, you will be present. Oraine, I want your men supervising the quay until this is done. If a barrel of wine cannot move for an hour because flour must, then that is the shape of the day. Oraine inclined his head with a little smile that was nearly a bow. Mace Tyrell colored, a faint blot of rose spreading over his cheeks, then thought better of being annoyed. Bread before wine, he said, as if the words had been his own all along. Wise counsel. Bread before wine, Varys echoed, pleased, as if she had given him a new phrase bird to flutter about with. Next, Catelyn said, the matter of the Queen's justice being seen to take bribes on Tuesday last. a stir like mice under cloth. Varys's eyes moved but did not change color. Mace's jaw tightened slightly. "You have the name?" he asked. "I have 2 names and a face," Catelyn said. "Ser Theomore will appear at 4th bell to answer. The man who paid him, who is a fishmonger who thought himself clever, will appear at 5th. We will keep them apart until their accounts are heard. If the accounts do not match, they will see the inside of a cell that smells of old air until the truth grows legs. If the accounts do match, Ser Theomore will find that a man who sells judgment has fewer teeth when he leaves the chair than when he sits down in it." Pycelle winced delicately. "Your Grace, there is precedent for, quieting such matters without too public a spectacle." "Precedent is only a story someone got away with," she answered. "This will be quiet enough. Quiet does not mean secret." Mace Tyrell found a smile that worked. "We stand with you. For today," Catelyn said inside her own head where only the old gods listened. She folded her hands so the seal ring pressed into the meat of her hand in a way that would leave a little moon there for later. "The crown's coin," Varys murmured, as if the words themselves required his breath to survive the walk across the table. "We have scraped the coppers with gentleness. We have polished the silver so that it looks like more than it is. And yet, there are demands growing with the day. Men love a new reign as they love a new fare. There are always hopes for what might be bought with it." Catelyn did not sigh. She imagined the cold weave of the gods would moss beneath her knees at Riverrun and let that be the sigh instead. "The levies stand where they stand," she said. "We will not raise taxes in the city this month. We will lower the harbor fees for the next 10 days to let grain in. Cut wine. Cut ornamental cloth. Move coin from the Master of Revels' chest to the city ovens. If the Master of Revels requires a feast, he may eat a grain ledger." Mace bristled. "The court must be the court, Your Grace. The people will eat bread and go to bed at night believing their walls are not lies painted upon air," she said. "They will not eat peacock. If you must parade peacocks, do so at your own table and let the plumes be your own expense." The Tyrell lord swallowed his protest, perhaps thinking of how plumes look when damp. Varys's mouth twitched without breaking into an expression. "And the North," Pycelle offered cautiously. "We have had communications, Your Grace, from certain persons who style themselves vs with HRM, certain titles. Letters from lords who have not yet decided how to be men," Catelyn said. She could see the ravenry in her mind, the hall of black eyes blinking at their own knowledge. "I will answer them. There is a letter for White Harbor, and another for Deepwood Motte, and a third that must go quietly to the mountain clans in words that remember their dead. I will attend them after petitions." "And the Riverlands?" Varys asked, light as a feather. "Blackfish Tully holds Riverrun, the twins hold hostages they mistake for coin, and bands of men without banners have found that leaving their farms is a way to eat another man's farm. Your hand cannot reach the forks of the trident from this table, but your seal goes in a raven's beak all the same." "My uncle will answer for Riverrun," Catelyn said, with no trace of doubt in the voice she made for other people. "And Lord Walder's sons write like men trying to convince themselves of their own bigness. We shall see how large they are when the city stops buying their gate tolls enhanced by clever ink." The door opened with the carefulness of a man who wants to appear to be interrupting himself. Littlefinger came in with his hands clean. His goatee was trimmed just so, and one curl had escaped where it would be noticed. He swept an elegant bow too shallow to spill anything. "Your Grace," he said, as if they were alone and had forgotten themselves together in a room. "Forgive lateness. A boat I was not expecting arrived with casks I had not requested, and a man who did not know he was in my employ tried to argue he was not." "We are making bread of wine today, Lord Baelish," Catelyn said evenly. "Take your seat." His eyes flicked to her ring and then to her eyes. He sat and arranged himself so perfectly it almost seemed accidental. He smelled faintly of bay leaves and quill ink. "We have covered the matters of harbor and grain," she continued, "of city justice, of coin. What remains is this: the investigation into the death of King Joffrey." Silence like new snow. Even Pycelle's sleeve whisper seemed to pause to listen to its own quiet. It was murder. She had held her own hand in the other to keep from touching the woman who stared at her from the bedpost like a thing half broken and half bending to break. That day had taught Catelyn a single clean thing. There are griefs one must not share. Not because sharing is wrong, but because the grief itself is a solitary island with rocks that cut other people open. She had left Cersei to her solitude then. Alone, her mind said now, and the word was not unkind. "We will not speak of her," Catelyn said. "We will speak of roads. Brigands on the Rosby Road. Carters harried on the Antler Way. A woman from Flea Bottom who has been turned out of her room because a man with gold wished to be nearer the castle. Those matters will take a king more than a poisoned wedding will." "It is true," Littlefinger murmured. "That coin has grown a taste for proximity. Then we will teach coin to keep its appetite behind its teeth." She broke the council then because the living day demanded that she walk in it, and because words will not feed a city until their legs are made of decisions. They rose with their little bows, some their own men, some instruments of other hands, and filed out. Littlefinger lingered as if he had lost something and hoped the losing looked like calculation. As he passed her, he said softly, "When we were young and the years behind us were smaller than the years in front, you told me no." She did not grace the memory with a nod. "I told a boy no," she said. "A man should have learned from that." His mouth smiled. His eyes stayed still. "I have learned a great many things," he offered, then left the chamber with the air of a man who had paid attention to the direction of the light when he came in and wanted his exit to please it. Outside, the stone of the keep held the night's breath still in its lower corners where the sun had not yet found reasons to pry it out. She took the long way down toward the Hall of Audience because she liked to pass the narrow garden. The citrus tree shone idiotically cheerful in its round fruit, like a jester insisting the day was not serious. In the shadow bough, and its branches, Brienne waited. The tall woman straightened as if ashamed of having been at ease. The steel of her was practical, and the blue of her cloak had taken on the city's dust in its lower hem. She held her hands as a blacksmith does when he is not holding a hammer and does not know where to put the strength for a moment. "My lady," Brienne said, then corrected herself without prompting. "Your Grace." "I am the same woman as I was," Catelyn said. "What has changed is only the manner in which other people must look at me." Brienne's jaw worked, as if the words made her swallow a stone. "I was told to wait here for your will." "Come," Catelyn said simply, and did not look to see whether the woman wished to be invited. They moved together beneath the little wall, past the 3 stone benches scored with initials no living person remembered carving. "How fare your men?" "They stand," Brienne said. "They do not leave the place where they are set." "You told me once that you had dreamed of knighthood as if it were a star you might reach by climbing a chain," Catelyn said. "Have you found the star any nearer?" Brienne looked sideways, startled by the kindness of the question, as if she had not expected kindness to be part of the day's duties. "The chain is longer than I knew," she said. "But I climb it." "Good." Catelyn stopped. Through a high slit in the garden wall, she could see a wedge of blue that had become morning proper. "I will walk the outer wards this afternoon. The Guild of Masons has sent a petition. Their foremen say the western wall's lower courses have begun to crumble in a fashion that offends them as men and frightens them as fathers. I want eyes on it that are not paid by hands that want coin to fix stones they have convinced us are broken." "I will go with you," Brienne said. "You will go before me," Catelyn answered. "If an arrow is to be loosed by a man behind a roofline, it will not find me first." Brienne's mouth set in a line of disapproval sharp enough to shave with. "I will not keep the arrow from you by being in front of it. You will keep it from me by seeing a hand move to the string," Catelyn said. "Sometimes that is what we can do." Men were already gathered in the great hall when she entered. It had never been a place she loved. Its grandeur always felt like a man telling himself how tall he was. Today its banners were more a forest than a proclamation. Tyrell rose, Baratheon stag, Lannister lion. The 7-pointed star embroidered low where the light would kiss it. The dais at the far end stood with its carved chair, But Catelyn would no more sit a chair like that while people begged her than she would eat cakes while her children went hungry. A lesser chair had been set below the dais and slightly to the side, 2 steps above the floor, only because men are more likely to listen to a woman who can be seen. A high stool stood beside it with a small, neat desk for a boy to write upon. Tommen arrived with Septa Miriel, and his Kingsguard lay white in the corner of the eye, their presence like chalk drawn with a precise hand. Jaime Lannister was among them. He had come to such mundanities after many days of absence spent in the practice yard with his ferocity and the blunt stub of his pride. The gold of him had less to do with hair now than with the stubborn coin of his will. He was not wearing the look that had made him infamous and adored. He was wearing the look of a man who was busy with his own penance. He bowed to her as a lord does to a queen whose favor would cut him, and his eyes did a small, private thing when he looked from Catelyn to Sansa and from Sansa to the boy. Catelyn had once taken him prisoner. He had once escaped on her mercy. The ledger of their interactions was a reckoning she did not intend to balance today. She inclined her head. His face showed nothing, but his left hand flexed, his only hand now, and then stilled. The first petitioner was a baker. She could tell by the way flour held to her cuffs as if it liked living there, and by the little burned scars across the backs of her hands where fire had reminded skin of its place. She curtsied and blurted without ceremony, "Honesty does not always remember its hat," that men with coin had begun buying loaves straight from ovens and turning them out at twice the price at street corners, and that if this continued the poor would eat ashes for bread. "Tommen," Catelyn said gently. "Write her name." He dipped his quill as if it were a sword and wrote. "Marla," the woman said, looking not at the boy but at the woman who had asked him to write as if the asking had been a grant of worth. "Marla," Catelyn said, "you will sell to the crown at no loss. Men who purchase your bread at your door for resale will be fined the price of their shoes each time they are caught. The captain of the watch will set men to attend the ovens. If a baker refuses to sell to the poor at a fair rate, we will be as stern with him as with any lord. The law is not a sausage to be sliced by those with the fattest hands." Murmurs like mice again. One of the hawk-nosed men near the back made a note in a ledger with a quick, angry hand. Varys, standing at a slight remove, saw it and let his eyes go blank. Another petitioner, a man with clean nails and an anxious mouth who represented the Guild of Dyers. He wished for purple cloth at court to be purchased only from guild-licensed vats. His complaint was wrapped so carefully in compliments one could have overwrapped a baby in them. Catelyn asked him what men had to dye the color of kings with their hands that felt like a woman's. He stammered and had no good answer. She granted him a hearing with the Master of Laws and moved him aside. A woman with a bruise that never grew above her collarbone came whispering to complain of her landlord, who was a friend of the watch. Catelyn listened until the whisper made a shape, then leaned down and spoke in the same tongue. So the woman would not feel as though she had been asked to shout her shame before banners. "You will go with Septa Miriel to the Sept," she said. "The Sept will be asked to find you a room of your own. The captain of the watch will be asked not to be a landlord." So it went an hour into 2. Tommen's hand grew sure as a small boat learns, and his notes took on shape. Sansa watched the faces. Twice, as if he had heard them without listening, the boy interjected a question that made a petitioner pause and look up as if pinched by the future. "Do your hands hurt when you work?" he asked the dyer. "How do you clean your oven?" he asked the baker. They were questions a child asks. They were questions a king should remember to ask if he wished the truth to make it to his table. Near midday a hush fell that began at the doors and moved like a line of geese through the hall. Cersei had entered. She wore mourning like a command. The black velvet did not delight in her body. It obeyed her. Jewels slept along her throat as if not daring to glitter. Her hair was bound so tightly a lesser woman's skin would have complained, and her face was the careful smooth of ice. 2 Lannister guards flanked her, red cloaks like blood that had brought its own wind. She did not look at her son at once. She looked at Catelyn. The years of hatred that men might have expected to see in her serenity did not show. There was a greater rage in the clean way she stood. She surveyed the lesser chair and then the dais and the distance between them. She measured it. "Your Grace," she said, letting the second word strike the first like iron on iron. "Your Grace," Catelyn said, because no one took courtesy from another woman and kept it without paying. Cersei's gaze moved to Tommen at last. It did not soften, but it recognized him. "You should not be made to sit there and listen to the unwashed wail," she said to him, as if no one else existed. "You are a boy. Boys belong at swords and lessons, not beneath 100 petitions about bread and bruises." Tommen's hand curled on his quill. He looked down at the notes he had made, as if they were a small animal he must not drop. "Mother," he said very carefully, "a king must listen." Cersei's mouth made a curve like a blade of metal. "A king must be made to remember that he is a king," she answered, "and that his mother's counsel is not a thing to be bartered for the favor of a northern widow." The hall held its breath, not so much to hear as to keep from being caught breathing near such words. Catelyn stood slowly. She did not rise to full height before she spoke. "We are holding open court," she said. "Those with private grief will be heard in private. You may send word to the Regent if you wish a private audience. I will grant it to you. Now you must leave or sit and watch as the law is made to recognize its people." Cersei's eyes, green in the way a hard apple is green and no other way, measured Catelyn as a man measures the height of a wall he means to breach. She lifted one hand. Rings flashed like small suns. For a moment Catelyn thought she might speak of Jon Arryn, of Robert, of old secrets that had eaten their own tails and become new secrets, of fathers and children and beds and sins. But she dropped the hand without using it. She turned and, without bowing, left the hall, the red of her guards fluttering into the corridor like torn silk. Tommen let out a breath so small it could have been mistaken for a feather leaving a bird. He did not look at his mother's back. He looked at the next petitioner and said, softly, "Your name." The hall, after a pause that felt like a held door allowed through, breathed again. When the last petitioner guessed by the door's light that the hour had finished pulling itself across the horizon, Catelyn called the session. Tommen's notes were a careful map of his listening. Sansa's eyes had grown storm-weary and then settled into a patient gray. Catelyn dismissed them to the noon meal and turned instead toward the narrow stair that led down into the bowels of the castle where cells are kept. Jaime Lannister caught up with her at the stairhead. It cost him only 2 steps and no more, and he did it lightly, as if he had not chosen to do it at all. "Your Grace," said Jaime, "I wonder, if the king's safety is your first charge, whether it is wise for you to walk into the bellies of the keep with only a tall woman as a wall." "I had thought you busy with polishing the honor of your cloak," Catelyn observed. He accepted the barb with a surprising absence of vanity. "The cloak is not polished, Lady Stark. It is scuffed and stained and more honest that way. Then wear it honestly and do not tell me what walls I may use for my body." She turned to go. He reached out and laid his hand, his only hand, on the barrel of the stairwell where it would be in her way without being on her arm. She deployed stillness. "I would not have my son grow without his mother," he said. Came out soft, voicelessly. It was a thing he did not say to the world. He said it to the stone because the stone would not tell anyone. Catelyn did not flinch. The knowledge of the truth of the boy's parentage had been like a stone in her shoe since the day she was told it. Something you can walk upon if you choose where to put your weight. "Your son has a mother," she said. "She is smaller than her anger and larger than what any of us make of her. She has no hours in which she is not a mother. The question before us is whether he will have a kingdom." "Will he?" Jaime asked. "That depends on what the men who want him to have no kingdom decide they can eat and live with." He smiled then, a small, crooked thing that was neither cruel nor charming but something rarer, weary. "I have known men to feast on their own fingers rather than share their soup. Then let us see that the soup is too hot for them to put their hands in." She stepped past his hand. He let her pass as if the stair had moved around her. The cells smelled of old water and iron that had remembered blood longer than any one man's body could. A pair of guards straightened. One of them coughed, the little, respectful cough of a man who does not dare clear his throat entirely. The turnkeys fumbled the keys as if keys were always fumbled. Tyrion Lannister, when they brought her to his cell, was seated upon the bench as if it were a tailor's table, and he were considering how to cut 2 pieces of cloth from a length that would only fairly yield one. He looked up. His eyes were the same odd, uncanny color they had always been. A shade that did not pick a name and force it to stay. "Your Grace," he said, "how unkind of you to visit me here. I have nothing to offer you but an odor and perhaps a jest, if I can find one that has not already died of despair." "You will have a proper hearing," Catelyn said. "I will not see a man condemned because he is convenient to hate." "How righteous," he mused, and somehow did not make it sound like mockery. "Will the city obey you when their mouths would rather taste easy blood than difficult bread?" "They will if no one offers them blood," she said, "and if the bread is honest." "Honest bread," he said softly. You did not murder the boy," she said. It was not a question and not an absolution. It was a statement of belief unsupported by any weight that would convince a ledger. He stared at her a long time. "Other men have told you that you ought to believe worse of me," he said at last. "Other men think the world can be built of the stories they tell about themselves. I think bread is grown from the ground the world offers. We will see how this ground yields. Perhaps in your reign, the city will take its metaphors before its meals," he said. "What a novelty!" He rubbed his lip with a short thumb. "I did not kill him. The king drank from a cup you held," she said. "And before that he ate a pie to which 100 hands had been kind enough to contribute. And before that he breathed air others breathed. I have slept with women who smelled less of other men than that feast did." "Names," she said simply. He smiled. "I can give you a list long enough that you must hire a second scribe to write it. In truth, I think fewer people wished the boy well than wished him dead. We must then examine who wished to be hand of death rather than a man of wishes." "Lady Olenna Tyrell," Catelyn said without flinching at the sound any more than she had to flinch at knives. "Her name is in everyone's mouth and in no one's ink. I have too much love of my own throat to put a particular lioness's grandmother into my mouth," Tyrion murmured. "But yes, there is an old woman with a sharp thorn in her pocket, and she does not stab without aiming first. Then again, there is a man with a chain around his neck who knows how to dribble truth so that it appears to be honey." "Pycelle," Catelyn said, "and a woman with hair like pride and eyes like a forest fire. Cersei, and 100 others. You will not arrive at the truth by process of elimination," he said. "You will not arrive at the truth by process at all. You will arrive at something that can stand long enough for other truths to grow over it like moss. If you desire justice, you will find it is a weaver's word, not a mason's." "I am a weaver," she said, "and I have done my share of mending that men never saw." "Then you are better suited than most to the work this city requires." He shifted, the chain at his ankle whispering. "I will say this. The boy's last look was not mine to make. I have seen death and this was not it. It was the death of a thing that believed itself without consequence. He had never done a thing and paid for it in full. Death asked him for payment and he had no coin. He died in debt. She did not permit herself to show pity. "You will be fed," she said. "Do not pretend to find that a kindness that makes you love me. It is only what the law owes you." He grinned, a flash of something almost merry. "I have not loved a law in my life." She left the cells with the taste of lantern smoke in her mouth, and with the sense that she had been asked by the day to carry 3 buckets when she had hands for 2. Brienne said nothing until they were back above ground. When they reached the narrow garden again, the citrus tree threw confetti light in dappled circles across the stone. "Your Grace," Brienne began, as if she had decided that she would say very little and had measured each word's weight in advance. "If you ask me to stand in front of you, I will stand in front of you. It does not matter what arrows find me." "I am asking you to stand in front of me," Catelyn said, "and I am asking you to not let arrows find you at all. The work we have is not the work a woman can do with 1 sword, though your sword does as much work as 3. The work is eyes and hands tied together properly." Brienne nodded. The gesture had no grace. It did not need it. They ate no true dinner. The noon table in the Regent's solar held platters that had been worried more than tended. Bread with the good crust already gone, cold meats that brought more smell than pleasure, but it was enough to count as food. Sansa came in with cheeks that had learned to keep their secrets. Tommen's hair was untidy in a way that told Catelyn his fingers had been thinking while another part of him was in a different room. He sat and reached for a heel of bread and looked at her ring before he spoke. "May I ask 2 questions?" he said simply, "and not be made to feel that I am silly for asking them?" She met his eyes and thought of Bran on a saddle, and of the summers of Robb's hands as they had learned to be bigger than the hilt would take. "You may always ask 2 questions, she said, "though I will not promise to answer both." He smiled, the kind of smile a boy makes when a game has been made that he will win by wanting simply to play. "Why did you speak softly to the woman who had a bruise and loudly to the man with the hat?" "Because shame makes a person smaller, and I wanted to make her bigger," Catelyn said. "And because pride swells a man until he thinks he is a building. I wanted to return him to man." "And," Tommen asked, "will men stop hurting women if you speak softly enough?" Sansa made a sound, the smallest, that was both a breath and a denial. Catelyn chewed a piece of bread until her mouth was ready. "No," she said, "but sometimes men stop when the room looks at them. I can make the room look at them." He nodded solemnly, as if she had given him a tool and he was testing its balance. "Second question," he said. "The law, is it a person? You talk about it like a person that owes things." "It is a promise," she said, "and promises are only as strong as the hands that keep them. If the hands are dirty, the promise grows sick. If the hands are careful, the promise grows strong." "My hands," he said, and looked at his fingers, ink-smudged and whole. "I will wash them then, and I will use them." "That is the beginning of a king," she said. She had not planned to say it, and she saw Sansa's look flicker with something like pain and something like hope. The room was suddenly raw with the people in it. Outside, a gull cried the way gulls cry when they pretend they are not laughing at us. The afternoon carried them through the wards as promised. Catelyn walked with Brienne 1 step ahead and 2 gold cloaks at her back. The Mason's foreman met her near the west wall with hats in hand and pride in hat. They walked the line of stones while the wind from the bay pressed smell into their clothes. The foreman spoke, careful and quick, and she asked the kind of questions men do not expect a woman to ask about mortar and substrate and the way salt eats. One of them, a lean man with an old fracture left visible along his wrist, said, surprised into honesty, "You have walked on walls before, Your Grace." "I have sat on them and wept too," she said, and then regretted telling truth to a man who might not know what to do with it. He put his hat back on his head as if he felt a cold. Back in the keep, a letter waited that smelled faintly of smoke and river mud. The hand was her uncle's. The words were the Blackfish's hard grain. River unheld. Men ate boiled oats and liked them less each day, but their anger made the oats taste less of nothing. Small men called themselves captains. Great men hoarded their horses. "When you call a council," he wrote, "call it with spears and with feather beds both, or do not call it at all. Men will come farther for comfort than for honor, and will claim they came for honor when they find a soft bed under their bones." Another letter, this one a narrow ribbon of cowhide with a name scratched on its back and a brittle sprig of mountain herb sealed into the wax. "Lady with the bright hand," it began. They would not call her queen, those men. They would not even call her lady without putting their own word upon it. "We will come down if the man with red hair comes with no men behind him. We will not come for anyone who smells like lion. We will eat their food and then return to the rocks. The rocks do not lie." She answered them each in her own hand. Her script was not pretty. It had been made in corridors and by lamplight. To her uncle, she wrote of bread and walls and the slow work of trying to turn men's faces from old sentences toward newer ones that might yet be true. To the mountain men she wrote, "The rocks do not lie. The cities sometimes do. Come down for bread. Bring 2 men less than you wish and 3 more than you think wise. Do not steal on your way. If you do, I will cut your hands off not because I am cruel, but because hands that take without paying will never do anything but take." When the sun wrung itself out into evening, the castle's corners filled with friendly shadow. Lady Olenna's supper had not been cancelled. Catelyn allowed herself to be dressed as a woman who must wear a battle face to a dance is dressed, with as little patience for pleats as is possible without making the women who pleat feel that their work is nothing. The bodice bit. She did not care. Sansa pinned her hair back and did not let her hands tremble. Olenna's black eyes glanced around the room lick. "Isuif the sparrows." "Your Grace," the old woman said, "I am an old woman, cannot bow. You will forgive me my stiffness. Age is not a thing even the Queen may order about." "I do not require you to bend," Catelyn said. "I require men to sit where they are put." "Do you?" Olenna said, and amusement showed itself, quick and hungry. "I have found that putting men where they belong often requires ropes." She gestured. "Eat. I promise not to poison you. I should hate to waste good food on an experiment that would teach nothing." "I do not eat much at evenings," Catelyn said, and allowed herself a piece of bread and a bite of cheese that had been chosen for its capacity to impress. Olenna watched her as a woman watches a fire she plans to cook on. "We will have women with stiff hair tell us stories about piety." The old rose went on, unfurling her contempt like a handkerchief with a droplet of perfume on it. "We will have boys who think a sword at their hip is a thought in their head. We will have my idiot son talk too much, and we will have your dwarf in a cell because that is the way the world arranges itself when no one rearranges it." "Did you kill a king, Lady Olenna?" Catelyn asked simply, as if they were speaking of the weather. The old woman laughed. It was a dry sound, but honest, like old paper being folded. "I am an old woman," she said again. "I do not carry bottles. I do not even carry my own chamber pot. I have killed, yes, but differently than you think. I have killed appetites. I have killed hopes. I have killed the notion that a man may speak and be believed because he owns land and an opinion. But no, Your Grace, I did not kill the boy." "You had more reason than most," Catelyn said. "Reason does not always take a woman's hands and make them do murder," Olenna answered. "Sometimes reason sits and taps its stick upon the floor and says, 'Wait, you did not ask me if I know who did. You asked me if I did. That is wise.'" The boy choked on a world that had decided to be rid of him. The world will pretend surprise while it arranges its lint for mourning. But no particular hand will be found because too many hands were present, and the sort of people who kill boys like that are the sort of people who do not instruct their hands to confess. "You do not strike me as a woman who keeps her hands clean to protect her soul," Catelyn said. "You strike me as a woman who keeps them clean because dirt under the nails makes you itch." Olenna's delight was brief and real. "What a treat," she said. "They have given us a queen who can speak and not be brave about it afterwards." The supper performed itself. Mace Tyrell did talk too much. He admired his own wit as men will. He did not say anything as dangerous as he thought he had said. Varys drifted in wearing politeness like a perfume of lilies and information. Littlefinger stood near a column and made a picture of not watching everyone all at once. The Queen Mother did not attend. Her absence sat in the room like a third course of nothing that everyone was forced to taste. When it was decent to leave, Catelyn left. Night had made the city into its other self. Torches crept along the streets like thoughts that feared discovery. In the far quarters, where the walls pinched the alleys too tightly, laughter made bargains with danger. Catelyn stood at the window of her chamber again and breathed the night salt. In the room's stillness, she could hear the discreet creak of leather as Brienne shifted in the antechamber. A wordless reassurance that a wall with a heart stood between her sleep and harm. On the table, the wooden token, pale and foolish, sat keeping itself. She took the token in her hand. She thought of trees. She thought of the sound of ice cracking in spring and of the warmth of sunlight captured in old stone. She thought of her children as if they were coins she had once held in her mouth and must not swallow. Robb had written once, brief and hard, and the ink had been his will. She did not know where Arya was. She had not said the girl's name aloud for days, as if saying it might thin the thread that held whatever still tied her to the world. Rickon was somewhere that foxes knew. Bran. No one had told her Bran was dead, and so she had decided not to let the world talk as though he was. And Sansa slept one wall away with her breath as steady as a cat's. Catelyn set the token down. She undid her gown as a woman undoes duty at night, not to be rid of it but to remember the body beneath. She washed her hands in the copper basin and watched the water take away the day and give her back her palms. The seal ring came off unwillingly, as if the finger had learned it. She set it down like a small moon on the table. While she stood with the towel pressed briefly to her face, she heard a step outside the door. Soft, then paused. She had learned many steps. This one was not fear. This one was the weight of someone who had thought too long and now wished to pretend he had not. She did not turn when Jaime Lannister spoke from her doorway. "You run the city like a household," he said softly. "You have offended men for whom households are the work of lesser beings." He stood in the half-light, his white cloak a ghost and no more, his face less lion and more man. "Do you come to threaten me, or to warn?" Catelyn asked. Her voice made no place for flattery to sit down. "Neither," he said after a pause. "I come to tell you something I have never told any person I did not want to share my bed." He laughed without humor. "I do not want to share yours, but I want to put this somewhere. Let it be here. I killed your king once, the one with the dark hair. I killed him because I believed that doing so would keep the city from burning. I was not wrong. I will kill again if the city would otherwise burn. If you keep it from burning, I will not have to kill. If you force it to burn by your goodness, I will hate you." She turned then. His face was strangely clean of its history. "They have no respect for property. They respect rock," she said. "That puts them ahead of many men in this room." Littlefinger smiled as if someone had told him a filthy story. "A letter arrived from the Rock," he said. "The elder lion demands acknowledgement. He demands that his grandson's murderer be produced by moonrise. He writes as if the sky had been suspended by ropes he had woven and will cut if his hands are not kissed. Lord Tywin writes what Lord Tywin always writes. Instruction disguised as honor," Catelyn said. "We will answer him that an investigation continues. We will tell him that the city is not only his quarry and that we do not present foxes because one hunter demands a trophy. We will make space for him to ride his rage without breaking the gate. If he rides here, he will not come with only his anger. The walls will have to learn new words for old work. Do you plan a great council?" Varys's voice was all pleasantness, but his eyes sharpened. "I plan bread," Catelyn said. "And if the bread holds, we will call a council. If it does not, we will call a war by its proper name." She looked down at the ring, at how it bit her. "For now, we will stand the day up and make it walk." "Your Grace," Oraine Waters said from the doorway, breathless but practiced. The kind of breathlessness one puts on when the news one bears wants to be thought urgent. "A ship has anchored in the roadstead, a Vale galley under truce flag. Its captain asks leave to speak to the Regent. By afternoon then," she said, "we will go to the wharf and hear him in the open air. Men speak differently where they can see weather." Varys's eyelids flickered in appreciation. "The wind is a witness no one can bribe." She left them to their little chattering works and went to collect Sansa and Tommen. In the solar, the citrus tree's fruit had ripened another day. There was a new note on Tommen's desk, a line that said clumsily, in a boy's one-word certainty, "Promise." She touched the word with her finger. She did not pray, not aloud. She moved again, down the spine of the keep, through its lungs and ribs, past men whose names she remembered because she had written them in a book and because when a woman says a name back to a man, he feels seen in a way that changes the shape of his next hour. Outside, the sun had come into its full. The bay threw light onto the underside of gulls. The city moved like a woman too busy to look up yet, who would perhaps at dusk lean in a doorframe and take what rest the cooling air would give her. At the wharf, men bowed in the way men bow when they are thinking about more than knees and spines. They bowed thinking of rumor and of what rumor might mean for their own skins. The Vale galley bobbed with the tide's small insistence. Its captain came ashore in a jacket too light for this salt and held a sealed tube in his hand. He knelt and held it up to her like something that might feed a household if it broke neat. "From Lady Lisa Arryn," he said. "Of the Eyrie." Catelyn took the tube and broke the wax and saw her sister's hand. A skittering thing that had once written childhood secrets and now wrote commandments for itself to obey. The words jumped. There was fear in them. There was also a kind of certainty that felt like a glass cup, lovely and ready to shatter. Lisa wrote of the veil as a pearl that must not be put before wolves. She wrote of the Eyrie as an altar. She wrote of the boy as the only man whose health mattered. She wrote, in a line that snagged the eye, of a marriage that would bind winter and summer in a knot. Sansa to her sickly son, Robin. Made in heaven and politics. Catelyn read that line 3 times and then looked out at the water until the gulls became their own ciphers and not messengers. She folded the letter. The wind tugged at a strand of her hair, mischievous, unconcerned with crowns. "We will answer," she said. "We will send back bread. We will send back honesty. We will send back a refusal tea. Oh, give my daughter to a boy who has not yet learned the weight of his own hands." The captain nodded, relief sliding through his posture like a knife out of a sheath. When they walked back up from the wharf, the city threw itself upon the hour like a dog upon a bed. People shouted more loudly now. The smell of fish had become the smell of fish cooking. A woman laughed in a way that made men look up and forget their trouble for as long as it took the laugh to die. Tommen stopped at a stall and stared at wooden toys, soldiers carved in stiff parades. The carver, an old man with a thumb missing, gave the boy one without coin. Tommen looked at Catelyn as if for the first time he understood that being king was sometimes the work of not taking what is offered. "I will buy it," he said at last, and took his small purse off his belt. "Pay the price he asks," Catelyn said, "and then give him the difference between what you think it is worth and what he asked." "Why?" Tommen asked. "Because he undervalued his work to please his king," she said. "And because you will not teach men to lie to you for love." The boy nodded, and in the tilt of his head she saw someone she did not want to see and chose not to name. He counted out coins, tongue between teeth, and the carver took them with a small, happy shock. Sansa watched with her mouth soft. Brienne watched without a face at all. Back in the keep, a raven waited with feathers that had not yet forgotten the sky. It hopped once upon the edge of the stand and blinked at her, insolent and holy. The message tied to its leg was short. The seal was stag, but not the one the city had been taught to know. The signature made her stare longer than she meant to. Stannis Baratheon, written in a thick, impatient hand, had sent 5 words to sit in the middle of her table and make the air around them start to crystallize. "Send terms. I will hear." She let the paper go and put her hand flat to the table and counted her own breath. The room sat with her, dumb and complicated. It had the look of a day that had begun to want more from itself than it had thought to ask. Catelyn lifted her head, and if her face looked older than it had in the morning, it also looked more like itself than it had in months. "Fetch ink," she said. "Call Varys. Call Orain. Bring a clean map." She turned to Sansa. "Send to Tommen's chambers. Tell the boy to wash and to sleep. Tell Septa Miriel to speak to him of promises. Tell him I will teach him a new word tomorrow, treaty." Sansa moved like a bird with a message tied to its leg, whose knot has been tied by someone with love and good intentions and poor skill. "Mother," she said, then stopped while the word made itself from hope, fear, and practice. "I will do what you ask." "Good," Catelyn said. "We will all do what is asked. The asking will make us what we must be." The ink came. The map came. The wind at the window lost a little of its salt and took on more of the land. Night sharpened its knife for the city's use. The ring pressed into Catelyn's finger and it did not feel heavier now. Felt exactly as heavy as it should. Somewhere in a cell a clever man made a joke for himself so that he would not forget how to sound dark with light around the edges. Somewhere along the western wall a stone sighed and decided to hold another day. Catelyn wrote until her hand cramped. Brienne shifted once, leather murmuring. Tommen slept in a room with a toy soldier near his bed. Sansa closed the stuck latch and lay down with her hair unbound. The bay breathed. The gulls laughed as they must. The night kept its counsel. And the woman with a seal ring on her finger drew words out of herself like a woman hauling water and planned in quiet what must be done with morning.